Hey everyone, welcome to Resilience Unravelled. This podcast is a result of my fascination with subjects like resilience, accountability, burnout, life fulfillment and other life and work-based performance issues, as well as many of the other obsessions I bump into in my life. I spend my time working with highly successful teams, people and organisations, and this podcast introduces their remarkable stories and expertise, as well as my own synthesis of the key issues, strategies, tips, tools and resources to thrive in life. If you find this podcast useful, why not go over to our site qedod.com. If you'd like some resources on how to manage and beat burnout, head to qedod.com/burnout2019 for some goodies. Stay tuned to the end to find out details of how to order a free ebook. Enjoy the podcast. So hey everybody, today I'm talking to Brian Ondrako, and you'll immediately notice from his accent that he's not from this country. Hi Brian.
Russell, thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. I know we bumped into each other because actually I was a guest on your podcast, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that later. But we had a good chat, and actually a little bit of a chat outside of the podcast, and we thought it'd be really great because you've got some interesting stories about resilience and adversity and such like, and I thought it'd be great to have you as a guest on this podcast. So thanks for joining me.
Yeah, excited to chat with you. I hope you've been doing well, and excited to kind of share some of the stories that we have with everyone.
Smashing. And obviously, from my audience, whereabouts in the world are you? Because clearly that's not a chipper UK accent going on there.
Yeah, well, the accent's was born and bred in upstate New York, but I actually I reside in North Carolina, so on the East Coast of the U.S. So in the capital of Raleigh, let's say, that's probably the easiest people would recognize, Raleigh, North Carolina.
Now I know why I wanted to talk to you, because I'm going on holiday there next year. We'll have to give some. I'll get some.
I'll give you some good tips. There's some cool stuff over here. It's a really neat area.
Yeah.
I've been down here I've been in the Carolinas for about 18 years, and it's been incredible. Just love the state, love the people, love just the kind of the mesh of cultures. So it's a really neat place.
So was moving there about culture in the first place, or was it something else that drove you down there?
I mean, the majority of the reason I went down was I was tired of shoveling snow, and I said, I'm moving out of New York when I finish high school, and I'm going to a warmer climate. So yeah, I actually, I have a background in golf. I played golf growing up. I wanted to be in the golf business. So I went to a great college called Methodist University, which was one of the top programs for like golf management in the U.S. And so I went down to Fayetteville, North Carolina, right after high school, for college. And that's what got me into the Carolinas. Fayetteville's about, for your listeners that may not know, it's about an hour south of Raleigh. It's big with Fort Bragg. It's a big military base, military area. But they have some cool colleges and a lot of golf courses nearby with Pinehurst. I'm sure some of your golf listeners know Pinehurst and the U.S. Open and some of the events they've had there over the years.
You're not far from the place to hold the Masters, really, comparatively. It's only a few hours drive, I guess.
Yeah, it's about 5.5 down to Augusta. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So, how did the golf work out then?
Well, I mean, for the most part, it was good. I mean, I went and got got a business degree, did professional golf management. Was my background, or I guess what you'd say, the degree I got from school. And I transitioned that into saying, if you asked me 15 years ago, I was going to be one of the top golf instructors, in the country. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach golf. I love the game. I love helping people, love coaching. And so that's what I, kind of branched out to do. I started teaching business up here. I moved to Raleigh, started teaching business, started to kind of try to build that a little bit. In terms of, I even think back, it's kind of funny now. It seems so rudimentary, but like, I remember I had like one of the first websites for like a golf professional in the area back in, this is 2006.
Yeah.
And, just trying to do some different things, be more innovative or try to get my name out there a little bit from a branding aspect. And that helped me, I taught for about 5 or 6 years before I got a little burnt out, really, and for lack of a better phrase, I just got burnt out with it. And we can get into that, but just some things I saw ahead of the game or ahead of the curve, if you will, of like what was going on with the game of golf. And I thought I could do some different things in my life, some things that could be more impactful.
Yes.
So that's ultimately why I got out of it full time.
So was the original plan to be a golf pro, a player?
Well, I think that's anyone that's a decent player growing up. That's always the plan, is to play professionally and try to do that. Again, this goes back to a lot of things I've thought about the last few years. My work ethic was there. It just didn't click for me in terms of the full game. I played pretty well. I never played at a high tournament level. I just didn't. If I look back now, I didn't get the reps in. So funny as we learn as we get older. Like for me, I look back look what I'm doing now, and then I look back at those times, and I'll kind of sit and ponder and think, man, if I just played, let's say, let's say even 12, 15 tournaments a year.
Yeah.
I have no idea if I would ever have made it professionally, or maybe I played in the mini tours or whatever, but I think I would have been a tremendously more accomplished player in terms of my mindset and how I approach the game. But I didn't play a lot of tournaments. I played a couple tournaments a year. They were kind of local events. And then I played high school golf, but that was it. So I look back, and it wasn't so much the game wasn't sharp, because I always said I would go against anyone with my short game. And you can ask some friends and family and stuff that played me. My long game was suspect a lot of the time, getting in the fairway. But man, you get me within 50 yards. I was pretty stealth, and that's what saved me a lot. But I didn't have the full package, and I learned that kind of, again, thinking back now, unfortunately, I just didn't recognize at that time that, hey, I need to get more reps. I need to get in the grind in tournaments and feel that pressure. Yeah. And feel how my swing holds up. And if it doesn't hold up, then I know I need to make some tweaks or some changes. And I just didn't do that.
So how was that coming to that realization that you sort of needed to pivot? There must have been a point where you thought, this isn't going to work. And often you find with sports people, artists, musicians like myself, in my background, it's that horrible moment when the sort of thing you've always wanted to do becomes the thing that actually isn't that thing anymore.
Yeah, and I know for you, obviously, from the music background, and you actually had a talent there. You were a professional, different than I was. I could coach and teach. They always say if you can't do, teach, right? So I don't know if it happened just overnight, or if it was if it was kind of progression. But what I saw, so let me take a step back. What I saw was, with YouTube becoming very popular, with attention spans, kind of lessening. I started to know this is probably in 2009 or 10, when I started to notice, I would get folks that showed up, and they would be all gung ho, ready to practice. We'd have a good session. I give them one or two things. Hey, here's what we're going to work on. Hey, let's meet up in a few weeks, kind of the whole progression. And they would come back, and I'd be like, hey, great, awesome. What's the last, couple of weeks been? How's your practice? I haven't played. Okay. I'd be like, all right, so let's work on, let's kind of see where you're at. And we start kind of working on the same thing. And it's not that they got upset, but it was almost, I started to notice, well, hey, what are we going to learn new? And I was like, you haven't learned what we were learning before. Yeah. You haven't grasped it. If you haven't gone out and practiced and gone through. So what I noticed this progression with, and it wasn't with everyone. I had some really awesome students that would practice a ton and play, but it wasn't, as I started to get more clientele, I would notice that it was just, again, the attention span was like, hey, I want now, versus I need to put in the time and effort to kind of see results. And then with the YouTube, sensation of, hey, I can just go watch a YouTube video of some golf instruction and pick it up in 2 minutes. Yeah. I started to hear a lot of that, because I'd ask people, where are you getting your instruction? What are you doing? And I'd hear a lot of that. So it's I saw the game changing, and it was never from a financial standpoint. I knew I wasn't going to be a millionaire, teaching golf. So it's never been about money for me. But at some point, when I was starting to have a family, I had to think about those things. Hey, do I want to work on the nights and weekends? Do I want to work on holidays? Do I want to grind for 7-8 hours a week to make 40 grand, US dollars? And what's kind of the impact I'm making to the world, if you will,
Yeah.
So I had a lot of those struggle moments. There was a lot of, I mean, it was tough to leave the game teaching full time. But ultimately I saw kind of a different North Star of, kind of where I wanted my life.
So it's. I remember someone talking to, because I used to play golf, nowhere near as well as you, but I remember my golf teacher saying that everyone should either learn dance or learn golf, and he said the reason for that is it really puts you in touch with your body and your mind, because more than anything, dance is better for the body, but the mind's important. But golf, there's balance between technique, but also actually this business of where your mind can actually completely undermine you. You can be a proficient golfer, but get on the tee and blast a shot somewhere just because your mindset's wrong for that day. And I thought it was quite interesting. So I wonder what your views are on that, actually.
Yeah, I mean, mindset is probably one of the biggest things that I think about, I ponder, I try to work on these days. And you're absolutely right. Golf is one of those great, you could take two golfers that are relatively the same player skill wise, but you get them in certain atmospheres and one does way better than other. And it's just because of their mindset. They have more confidence, or maybe they visualize things different. Under pressure, they can handle it more. So those are some things that over the years you learn, and it takes time. And that's what, again, going back to like teaching and coaching a lot of folks, I've noticed that you get them, on their, as you always say, kind of the range rats is kind of like the term was used in the U.S. a lot of, like, someone just goes beats balls and whatever. And great, you could hit it well. But when you go step on that tee and play in your weekend foursome and you got a couple dollars on the line maybe, and you start folding, you think like, oh, my game sucks or whatever. Well, no, it's not that. It's just that you haven't tested it yet.
Yes.
You haven't put it in those, situations. You haven't, you have not seen how it holds up under pressure. And once you do that, you start, and that's why a lot of folks have trouble, we don't have to make this about golf. I can go about golf all day, but like, that's why a lot of folks, I think, have struggles lowering their score. There's always, I can't remember it's not a law, but the theory, I can't remember off the top of my head now, so I won't say it, but like the equilibrium, basically. People only, you go to some certain level, you may know what I'm talking about, right? We're like, let's say you're a 90 shooter, you shoot around 90 most times. If you get, to the 14th hole, I have so many stories of people telling me they get like the 14th hole and they're like, 10 over par. So they're well under what they would shoot. They'd shoot like 82 if they parred out. Yeah. And then they go like triple bogey, quadruple bogey or something to finish. And they're like, man, I almost hit. And I said, yeah, because your body, you got so nervous. You were thinking about that 90. Yes. You weren't able to get over the hump. And eventually you get over the hump, the players that put the time in, and that's how they improve and play better and better.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a common theme with people who are successful. They talk about talent in a sort of slightly, well, that's just a given sort of thing. But what actually makes the difference is work. And, there's people like Gary Vaynerchuk who are full on the work mantra and such like. But I do think people underestimate this idea of, you have to practice your craft. I worked in the performing arts, and I used to watch ballet dancers practicing for 8 hours a day, and musicians, we used to practice for 6 to 8 hours a day. And there was a real correlation between how much you practiced and how much, and then of course how much you performed, because as you say, you've got to deal with the pressure. Now, one of the things that happens a lot in us in the music business and in business is this idea of choking under pressure. When you've got the yips, or you've got a hard shot to play, or you've got a presentation to do. How do you help people around that sort of subject area?
Handle choking?
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, have you experienced it?
I just feel, I've choked. I've been in situations like that. It's interesting, kind of on the spot as I think about it. I don't know if you could help people with it. I think you have to go through it.
Right.
To experience, it's kind of like, I'll try to, let's use music as an example. The first thing that came to mind. It's like imagine if, you know how to play music, you're in terms of your professional background, but let's say someone's trying to coach you that had never played music. they just studied music and they had the back, the technical knowledge, but they never actually did it. That's a different conversation versus like, hey, this person has been in the grind, they've done it, they've experienced it. They can share more of the mental, preparation and background. So let me say that first. I think part of it is sometimes you just have to go through it and you have to experience that heartache, which I've done several times on several occasions. And again, what's interesting about it is you overcome it if you can, and maybe you come out on the correct on the other side, and you actually achieve some things after you go through that. Everyone wants to get to that finish line so quick. They always forget that there's a journey involved, and everyone's journey is different. Everyone has different chapters in their book. It's not always exactly the same. And that's why, that whole, quote is like, don't basically, the whole chapter of a book. I'm losing my thought now. I need more coffee, I guess, but like, don't judge a book by the chapter you walked in on, if you will. Right. It's like everyone's at a different point in their life. So how do we actually, understand individuals? So going back to what you mentioned, I think from a choking, whatever, I think a lot of that comes down to just, again, the mental preparation. Yeah. Can you calm your mind? What are you doing day in and day out to improve your mindset on things? Are you putting yourself through many challenges? This is why, again, we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but why fitness is so important in my life. A lot of people ask, I started CrossFit about, I don't know if your listeners know CrossFit. It's an international thing, but it's huge in the US. I started CrossFit about a year and a half ago, and I'd been doing different fitness things for 15, 20 years. But one of the reasons I did that, obviously I wanted to, improve my muscle mass and gain some weight and do those things. But really one of the other things was it's so intense is that I wanted to see where I can push my body. Right. And not just my body physically, but my body mentally. And what I've noticed over the last year and a half, almost 2 years, is that some of the other situations in my life I've been in, where in the past, I might have folded, but I might have, gotten to a challenging, mindset, or maybe I was questioning myself. I now have more confidence in those situations because I've kind of put myself through the ringer and said, hey, I can actually do this. I can overachieve. Where maybe I thought that I couldn't go that far. So I think a lot of it's you got to go through it. But secondly is you've got to actually give yourself maybe these mini battles, if you will. Yes. Try to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. It could be as much as, I think Tim Ferriss is the one who always says this, but like, he has this challenge of like, basically asking for 10% off wherever you go kind of thing. Like, get yourself out of your comfort zone. Like going to Starbucks and asking for 10% off, like, who cares? Like, no, but most people are scared to do that. Yes. But even that little mini win, if you did it, all of a sudden, you kind of, maybe later on, you don't mind, asking for something bigger or negotiating or whatever. So that's a long tangent on it, but.
No, I think that's a really, really clever answer, because it's two things there. It's three things. One, which is rehearsal, one, which is practice. So mental rehearsal almost, one which is practice. And I like this idea of the mini challenges. And I do that thing about asking for 10% off in Starbucks and regularly get it. And whenever I go to buy anything, I always get a discount. And it's that thing where you start to expect it. And of course, actually, you end up getting what you want. But the third thing is, there are times when it doesn't work. And it's not getting bent out of shape when it doesn't work, is it? It's actually saying, okay, well, this time it didn't work. This time I choked. I went through it, and next time I won't. And I think you have to. I like that. I like that thought. I mean, it's the whole point of resilience, isn't it? You have to sort of face your fears and learn from them, and do it differently next time round in a way.
Right, and I think part of it too is, and I don't want to bucket everyone and say the majority of people. I have no idea what the numbers would be or how but a lot of people, because I used to be like this, and I probably still am in some regards, is they put themselves in comfortable situations their whole life.
Yes.
Their whole life. They have a certain house they live in. They have it set up the way. They maybe go to their job for 8 to 10 hours a day. Maybe they do some things outside that, some restaurants close by, but then they come home, and it's a very comfortable life.
Yeah.
And that's why I think I won't go into it today, but that's why, I can sit here for hours talking about why it's so logical to me, like why there's obesity epidemics in the US, why we have challenges with other things that are very politicized. But a lot of it's logically, you look at it, and I think it's because people are very comfortable with their life. They're comfortable in their thinking, and they're not trying to branch out and improve and say, how do I get better and better at little things, but also maybe that helps me in the long run. Again, putting in that time, you talked about it, like the practice is so important, the repetition going forward. And that's why going back to one of the things that, I don't know if the word annoy is the best word to use, but just like, it kind of just rubs me the wrong way is when people say like, oh, he was born that, or she was born that way. She's just talented. Yeah. Okay. Yes. LeBron James was born to be, 6'9", and probably the muscle capacity, so he was able to be a dominant. If basketball didn't exist, that's why I don't like, oh, he was born to be a basketball. Like, no, what if basketball was never invented?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why we don't look logically. It's like Tiger Woods or anyone else. Like, oh, he's, no, Tiger had a golf club from the age of 1 year old, and his dad just like peppered him to hit golf balls every single day. Yes, he has a body type that's really good for golf. But anyways, what it goes back to is talent can only take you so far. You have to have the work ethic. Absolutely have to have the work ethic. And then you have to have the mindset to back it up. Because as we know, there's a lot of folks out there that have they're talented and they have good work ethic, but they start to lose confidence. And we see it with a lot of sports stars where, like, what happened to them? Well, it's because probably they didn't believe in themselves and their confidence went down. It's not that they couldn't physically do it anymore.
And you've made a really fascinating point there, which is we've built a society to make us comfortable, which is sort of been, the pursuit of, a more affluent lifestyle and such like that. We have all the things around us we want. And then suddenly that lifestyle is making us unwell because we have obesity, we have more mental health problems, we have, this huge sense of entitlement. We have, this rumored new generation that seem to be less resilient or robust than other generations. And it is interesting that we've sort of, we do need to put that level of change back into our lives, don't we? It's because it's good for our brains. It keeps our brains active and healthy. And from what you're saying, it's actually good for your body as well.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But I look at it from my own life. Listen, I'm nothing special. I'm an average guy, right? But I look at where and I don't mind saying my age. I'm 36 years old. And back when I was in my early 30s,
I'm just being jealous.
I had,
that's why I've got my face at the moment.
But the one thing I would encourage, and this is why I don't think that age is the matter. I think you could do this at any age. But and again, I don't know if it was when I left golf, I just started to think more. I give a lot of credit to what I call virtual mentors. We talked about Gary Vaynerchuk earlier. Like, he was one of those guys, back in 2011, he was very unknown at that time, where I came across some of his videos and really started to follow him and his message and some of the things about, getting out there and, kind of, if you have that fire to be an entrepreneur, go do that. Don't just be settled in life type thing. And that kind of helped, kind of kick me in the pants, if you will. But what I was getting at is, I kind of call it this Renaissance period. It's kind of, I use that as a joking, the Renaissance and all that, but that's really what the last 4 or 5 years of my life has been. I'm a completely different person today than I was 5 years ago. Yeah. And I'm not standing out, on the soapbox, like, oh, everyone, because some people may say, oh, I'm pretty similar, but 5 years ago I was doing the same job or I was doing whatever. I would encourage people, what I did though, if you look back 5 years and prior, like I always said, I wasted my 20s. That's not technically true. I accomplished some things and, like I said, try to grow this career in golf and stuff. But really, in terms of the learning and knowledge gain and getting outside my comfort zone, I absolutely just, I was horrible at doing that. I was so settled and comfortable and I said, I got to make this change. This is ridiculous. So that's really what I did 4 or 5 years ago. And it really caught on a few years ago. So that's everything from, if I went through the list of like all the different things, changing my diet, I'm pescatarian now. I stopped eating meat because I don't like killing animals. I don't like the harm that animals are doing on the, if you look at the factory farming and stuff. And I said, well, then why am I eating this? I stopped drinking cow's milk 5 years ago, same reasons. So I started going through these things. My fitness changed. How I learned. I hate reading, but I absorbed more through podcasts and videos. I read a little bit. but I started to write down things more. I started to go through this whole, like, again, I call it a Renaissance period because it was a learning for me. Yeah. I said, what don't I know? What don't I know? I have Google available. If I want to know something, all I have to do is type it in and learn about it. Yeah. And what I realized was, wow, there's so much information out there on these topics that I care about: the environment, fitness, health, nutrition, business, entrepreneurship. That, man, there's a lot of information. Let me go research that. So that's kind of where I am today from even 4 or 5 years ago. And if I didn't make that change, I don't know what happened.
And is that what led to the start of your podcast?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'll give the quick kind of, snippet on that. So this goes back to, again, I think I'm big on, and that's why the podcast is called Just Get Started. Yes. Because I tried to start it 3 times. Right. And the first 2 times I failed. So long story short, I went to this conference I was invited to, or the company I work for. I got us into this. It's for designers. It's a phenomenal conference for like professional sports designers and stuff, called Major Level Creative. And anyways, got to know the co-creator of that, Chris Garcia, awesome guy. And anyway, so he invited us to the show. This is a couple of years back now. And I said, man, this is pretty cool. I met some awesome people. Well, I met this one guy named Adam Martin who had this podcast. And I had been listening to podcasts for a while, but I was like, oh, this is cool. So I started talking to him a lot about his podcast that he does, Makers of Sport. And again, around design and creative stuff. But anyways, I said, man, I've been wanting to start a podcast. Man, I'm going to start one, Adam. And he's like, yeah, Brian, you should do it. And he gave me some tips here and there. Well, sure enough, that year went by. And I saw him at the same conference the next year. Ooh. And I hadn't started the podcast. Yeah. And we were talking about it. And I said, I know, again, what do you think my excuse was? I was busy, had a lot going on, Mm-hmm. Same thing. Talked with him, said, no, yeah, I really want to get one started. I'm going to do whatever. A year goes by again. So now we're in summer of 2017. And we talked with him. And again, I haven't started it. And I told him, I said, Adam, I am starting a podcast. I was like, you're not going to see me here next year without starting one. And he's like, all right. And I said, you're going to be a guest on it. And I told Chris I'm going to have him as a guest too. And that's how it finally kicked me into gear. And the reason I went podcast, so just to give you an interesting story to your listeners, I think this is so huge. The reason I start with a lot of my podcasts, like we did with yours, of like, what was your upbringing about? What was the story? And we don't get into that as deep sometimes. I wish we had 5 hours to talk about it. But I had a teacher in high school when I was a senior. I took a class called public speaking. And Mr. Hines was the teacher. And he said to me, I remember he just pulled me aside one day. I was walking to class. He's like, hey, Brian, you got really great pitch and tone. You should be on radio someday. This is back in 2001. Radio was the only thing there. There weren't podcasts then. But I never forgot that, because people throughout my adult life had always said, I don't know if I always agree with them. Like, I don't know if I have a great voice or not, but they always said, like, Brian, you got a great voice. You got a really good for radio and stuff like that. So I'm like, all right, maybe this is something I should do. I love interview shows. I've been watching, again, where your listeners are probably all over the world. Like, they may know Regis Philbin. I used to watch live, Regis and Kathy Lee was a big TV show, big interview show. I grew up watching David Letterman and Jay Leno and, all of those type of interview type shows. That's what I enjoyed watching as a kid. I don't know. It's so funny looking back now. I'm like, oh yeah, I watched a lot of those type of shows. I'm big, Ellen is huge now. I don't get to watch her much because she's on during the day, but like, I just enjoy the interviews, the conversation with people. So all of that together, I said, all right, well, I'm going to start a podcast. What am I going to do? Well, I love interviewing people. So let's do an interview show. Yeah. Okay. Let's do a podcast versus doing some other things, right? Because, the voice and I love the conversation, and podcasts I thought was the way of the future, where it was going. And the reason it's called Just Get Started is because I didn't start. And I said, man, there's got to be a lot of people out there that are in the same boat as me. They're a late bloomer. They feel like, hey, nope, this is life. This is how it's going to be. And I guess I'm just going to cash my chips in and I'm done. And I said, nope, that's BS. you can do a lot in your life. I don't care what age you are. So that's why it's called Just Get Started, because I wanted to interview folks like yourself, founders, entrepreneurs, even just solopreneurs, people that have done things different and said, I'm going to go outside my comfort zone. I'm going to try to create something. And they may not even do it full time. So most of the guests are full time now, but some are still like doing it as a side, as a side hustle and trying to grow it. So it's just to kind of give people that confidence that, hey, you know what, you can do this too.
Yeah.
So that was a very long-winded of the story, but that's basically how it started. And now I just launched, as we're speaking today, episode 69. So it's been a year and a half, almost it'll be 2 years this Thanksgiving doing the podcast.
So you must be dropping them once a week or something, are you?
I try to drop it once a week. Yeah. And sometimes I've done I'll try to do 5 or 6 a month. I was doing it really for the last several months that way, but I'll probably get back to just once a week.
Yes.
So sometimes I was doing like a Monday, Thursday type thing, but yeah, my goal, and this is, this goes back to like goal setting and those type of things. What I like to do is just like most people do, they got their mirror in their bathroom. I rate my goals. Yes. And I got 3 goals that are on there. One's for my full-time job. Remember, just so your listeners know, I work a full-time job. I'm in software sales. And I have a goal for that specifically, but my 2 other goals are personal goals. And one is, I'm finishing up a children's book that'll launch in November.
Wow.
And that was one of my goals at the beginning of this year, to get that out. And then secondly, it was to get to 75 episodes by the end of this year. So just to give some context, when this year started, I was at episode 35. So I need to put out 40 episodes in a 52-week span. And I mean, basically how it's lining up, I'll launch episode 75 probably sometime in, end of October. So I'll beat that. I should get over 75 by the end of the year. So I think it's so important. I never really did that. I started to write down my goals within the last couple of years. I'd write down these daily goals. So I'd write down 4 to 6 daily tasks that need to be created, the most important tasks, as I was trained to kind of call them. And now, but like I did the first time ever in my life. So again, 36 years old, first time ever in my life, I wrote down on a mirror in my bathroom the main goals that I wanted to achieve this year. And it's been interesting every day looking at those.
Really?
Every day looking at those, and basically it's accountability. And am I holding myself accountable to those goals and what I want to be in my, do in my life?
I remember reading something. I wish I could remember the source of it, that said something about always having a mirror near your desk, because the very fact of looking into a mirror in your own, it's that sort of shared accountability of seeing yourself. And I think having the goal written on the side of it is a genius idea. What a great idea. I'm going to do that myself.
Yeah, it's not that I came up with. I mean, there's a lot of people that have done that. It's just,
you've done it as well.
And I think, it's the accountability. I'll plug one of the guys I've been following for a couple of years now, and your audience may or may not know him, but I absolutely recommend to go listen to this guy. He uses some choice language, so if some don't listen to that, that's fine. But his name is David Goggins, and he's ex-military in the U.S., but he was a Navy SEAL. He was an Army Ranger. But this guy's story is probably one of the most fascinating stories I've ever heard about. His book called Can't Hurt Me. I would absolutely recommend if all of your listeners that want to kind of get a book, not only just to motivate them, but to almost kick them in the pants, like, oh my gosh, like I thought I had it bad.
Yes.
I would recommend to get the audio book. So if you want to read his book, read it, but I would recommend the audio book. But David Goggins, Goggins.
Yes,
if you search David Goggins, he's an ultra marathon runner now. But it's just a fascinating story. Yeah. But he talks about, his accountability mirror and how he changed his life, basically looking in that mirror every day and holding himself accountable to the things he wanted to do. So there's some really interesting stuff in that anyway. So I absolutely recommend that, because I don't read a lot of books, as I said earlier, but listen to this audio.
Yeah.
Listen to this audio book. It's unbelievable. You almost can't put the story down because it almost seems like it's not believable when obviously it's all factual. So
yeah. Look, we can talk all day. I've just noticed the time. Actually, need to be slightly more respectful of your time. Brian, if people want to listen to the podcast or find you on the World Wide Web, how do they find you?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a ton of Andrekos out there, so you can just type in, Brian Andreko, Ondrako is how you spell my last name. But I'm at Brian Andreko on, Instagram, and I probably spend most of the time on Instagram, Twitter a little bit. I'm trying to I won't go into this today, but trying to do some things where, kind of almost get away from social media a little bit, take some detoxes, if you will. But you can always check me out there. My website, brianandreko.com, is probably the easiest. It has, the podcast. I write a lot of blog articles and had in the past. I even have something that's kind of cool that I put up there for anyone with a website is called a Now page. Mm-hmm. So I update it every 3 months of what's going on in my life, kind of a short kind of synopsis of, hey, here's some things I'm working on. So it's kind of a cool thing. If people care to check, they can kind of see what's going on in my world over the last few months or so.
Oh, yeah. Excuse me, I'm just reading it.
No, that's fine.
I shouldn't really, you shouldn't have tempted me. I'm so easily distracted. Brian, it's been an absolute joy to talk to you today. Thank you so much. So the podcast has just getting started. brianandreko.com is the USP. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Russell. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening today. You can go to our site qedod.com/podcasts and subscribe to hear other titles in our series. Or you can contact us at info@qedod.com to hear and find out more about tough love, leadership, accountability, resilience and burnout. You can go to our site qedod.com/burnout2019 to hear and get access to a load of resources to help you manage and fight burnout. And you can go to qedod.com/free ebook to hear more about the fundamentals of resilience. Until the next episode, keep on thriving.